So with that, let me introduce Chad Riedy, who has been an advocate for cystic fibrosis for a number of years. He actually was here a few weeks ago to meet with congressional staffers and really explain what cystic fibrosis is all about and how the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and the government through the NIH and FDA can really help to advocate for people with CF or help people with cystic fibrosis. So I'm delighted that he could come and tell you about his journey with CF and some of the things that he's been involved with.
Thank you. I'm not much of a podium person because I'm not very tall. And so I will stand sort of over here on the side. And then I've got about sort of, I think, I'll give you guys a brief sort of rundown of my story and journey with CF. I have to warn you, as I already starting to am, I get a little emotional. So I will probably pause a few times to compose myself. But I just wanted to start, and then I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have. Nothing really, to me, is off limits. If I do not feel like answering the question, I will tell you, but I'm usually a pretty open book. So I want to start with what an honor it is to be here with you all today and to share a little bit about my perspective in living with life with CF for the past 38 years. Before getting started, I want to thank Dr. McKazel and the Parent Advisory Board and and Hopkins for having me here to be with you all today, and to my care team for the past 15 years or so here at Hopkins. Have worked tirelessly to keep me healthy. They've celebrated many highs and many lows, and I am truly grateful for everything that they've done. Special thanks to the foundation, to my local chapter, and the National Foundation for their never-ending determination to hopefully one day make this disease nothing more than a memory. And this is where I will lose it for a few seconds. To my mom, who's at my house with our boys, my dad, who is here. My parents provided me the opportunities and the belief that this disease was not an ending, but a beginning. To my boys, Liam and Tate, who, to paraphrase one of my favorite books, The Grinch, Who Stole Christmas, it's fabulous. If you do not read that on a regular basis, the cadence in that book is awesome. Grow my heart 3 sizes every day. To my wife, Julie, thank you. I'll skip over a lot of the other stuff. So now a little bit about me. As you guys know, my name is Chad Riedy. I'm 38 years old. I've been married for almost 13 years. Jill and I are fortunate enough to have 2 amazing kids, Liam, who is 9.5, and Tate, who turns 6 in a couple of months. I like to think that I'm an award-winning Lego builder, barbecuer, and just an awesome all-around guy. Some may argue with that. I'm a husband, a dad, a father, and an avid sports fan, and still not over the fact that we won the World Series. Go Nats. Sorry for you Orioles fans. I have panic attacks, anxiety, and bouts of depression. Although I'm in between jobs right now, I work full-time. And I also find great joy in volunteering and working with the CF Foundation, locally and nationally, in any way that I can to give back to this community. Now that we've talked about that, also as Dr. McKazel said, I'm National Advocacy Co-Chair for the Foundation, as well as chair our local Tomorrow's Leaders program. So let's talk a little bit about my journey. As you listen, I hope you'll find and see how the ebbs and flows of living with this disease has shaped the way I tackle life. I'd like to travel back in time, if we can, to 1984, where a young Chad was 3 years old, suffering from constant stomach pains, terrible gas, and digestion issues. Sounds like a lot of fun, I guess, right? At the time, doctors tried several different methods and antibiotics, even treating me for parasites on at least one occasion, obviously to no avail. I would see temporary relief, but mostly the symptoms kept returning. Alas, the pediatrician asked my mom that all too simple phrase that many of us in this room know: when you kiss him, does he ever taste salty? And so our journey with CF began. That same year, at the age of 3, I was diagnosed at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C., by a doctor named Lucas Kolchiski, who we all referred to as Dr. K. As a 9-year-old, I don't think I could pronounce that, even if I tried. At the time of my diagnosis, my parents were told that I most likely would not see my 12th birthday. At this time, CF was still very much a childhood disease. As many of you know, in 1984, as Dr. McKazel just said also, in 1984, we still did not know what the CF gene was. And in fact, it wouldn't be until about 5 years later that this discovery was actually made. At that time, and for a good portion of my childhood, we did not have much in the way of treatments. We had manual chest PT, existing antibiotics, and when in the hospital, Mucomist. For those of you who have ever tasted Mucomist, it is awful. And if you haven't, be thankful that you haven't. Some say it might taste like cat pee. There was no Hypercell, Pulmozyme, Caistin, or Toby, and there certainly was not Kalydeco or Cambi, Symdeco, or Trikafta. Growing up, I was pretty active, playing lots of sports: soccer, basketball, gymnastics, lacrosse, tennis, and swimming, and maybe a few more. I played in the mud, jumped in puddles, jumped in leaves, and spent a ton of time hiking in the woods with my dad and friends. To others, and often to myself, you would not know I had CF. My parents did a fantastic job of making CF seem like a nuisance and not like something that controlled all aspects of my life. Yes, there was chest PT to be done before school and after, but that otherwise we went about our lives. This was not something that controlled us. Before coming to Hopkins as an adult, I attended CF clinic at Georgetown University Hospital, where Dr. K was responsible for my care until I was about 20 years old. I would have an appointment with him once a month, where we would do routine blood work, chest x-rays, and he would listen to my lungs to see how they sounded. Initially, I did not have routine PFTs like we do now. In fact, I don't think it was until middle school or high school where I did them on a regular basis. Instead, Dr. K used to take a tailor's tape, like the one that you use when you get your pants hemmed or a dress hemmed, and he would wrap it around my chest, and I would take a deep breath, and he would count the centimeters as I inhaled and exhaled to see what my lung volume was. I would then take, I'd like to think that that was our exact science. I also had a very different diet in those early years as compared to now. Growing up, I was encouraged to avoid fatty foods like pizza, peanuts, and anything else that could potentially cause stomach issues, right? Completely different from now, where everybody's encouraged to have this high-fat diet to help gain weight and maintain those weights. By the time I was 18, I had been hospitalized only 4 times, with the last of these 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for college. These were mostly for routine maintenance, where I would get IVs for about a week to 10 days, have polyps removed, and often get a bronchoscopy to flush out my lungs. Before moving on, there's one of these visits that still sticks out in my mind to this day. After a routine visit to Dr. K when I was in elementary school, he called my parents and suggested that I be checked into the hospital. As I'm sure you all can imagine, I was not exactly happy about this. Not only was it the end of summer and I did not want to miss time with my friends and at the pool, we had also scored tickets to the US Open that year. At the time, I was playing a lot of tennis, was a huge Andre Agassi fan, was growing out my hair like him, and wanted to be tennis's next rebel. It was a dream of mine to go to the US Open, to see him play along with Sampras, Graf, Courier, and all the other greats of the time. Well, I'm sure you can all see where this is going. We never did make it to the US Open that year, as I was in the hospital, and despite a lot of begging and pleading of Dr. K to let me out for a couple of days, we never made it. Well, in the grand scheme of things, missing the US Open was trivial. It was the first of many other times that CF would get in the way of life. And in case you're wondering, I still have never made it to the US Open. But that's okay. Got to go to the World Series, lots of other awesome experiences. After high school, I went to college at Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio, where I played lacrosse, managed a local watering hole, and graduated with a degree in history in 2003. I stayed healthy during my years at Wittenberg and would continue to be healthy until 2007. A quick sidebar. After college, when I moved back home in 2004, Dr. K had stopped practicing medicine. I believe at this time he may have been, 80-something. He recently passed away last year at the age of 106, or 104, I believe. So he could not treat me anymore, so I needed to find a new care team. Living in Virginia, we had heard that up here at Hopkins they had started a CF clinic for adults. This sounded like a great opportunity, and even though the drive was 45 minutes on a good day, we decided to give it a shot. So that year, we came up to check things out and to meet with Dr. Boyle. Needless to say, it was one of the best decisions we ever made. Now, back to the story. In July of 2007, Julie and I were married. After returning home from our honeymoon, I started having trouble breathing and began to notice that it was getting harder and harder to perform routine tasks like walking through the parking lot to work and carrying on a normal phone conversation. After coughing up blood for the very first time in my life, I decided that maybe I should call my care team. They told me to come up and to see what was going on and to see what we needed to do. This visit lasted a little bit longer than I was hoping for. Turned into a week to 10 days in the hospital on IV antibiotics and receiving, I don't know how many times I got chest PT during the day, 3 or 4, 5, 6. After some improvement, I was allowed to go home with another first in my life, home IVs. This is when the disease for me, that became very real. Before getting sick, my lung function was somewhere in the upper 40s. And to be honest, it was something that I really never paid attention to, as it never controlled or affected my life. When I checked myself into the hospital that day, it was at 33%. Thankfully, I was able to rebound, and my lung function rose back to around 40%, where it would stay for the next 7 years or so. I pause here for a second, as I can't imagine what it was like for Julie to be going through this. We'd only been married for 2 months, and here I am, the sickest I've ever been. Not only my first time in the hospital as an adult, but also her first experience with this hospital stay and seeing the truly ugly side of this disease. As I reflect back on those moments, I realize just how fortunate I am to have her. Her strength and support carried us through that week, and they continue to do so today. During the next 7 years, my lung function remained stable. My treatment routines increased, as did the amount of antibiotics that I was taking. There was certainly an adjustment for both of us to be had on the increased demand that CF was having on our life. But as we always do, we made it work because it had to. It was also during these 7 years that we decided that we wanted to start a family. After having a long discussion one day in clinic with Dr. Merlot and getting his encouragement, we decided to have Julie tested to see if she was a carrier for CF, and then we would wait to make the harder decisions. She came back as a non-carrier, so in 2009, with my health stable, we decided to go through IVF, and on June 11th, 2010, I stood in the maternity ward at Georgetown holding our son, Liam. It's hard to say at this time if life could have gotten much better. My lung function was stable. I was a dad, married to an incredible woman, and there was talk of these new drugs called modulators that could treat the underlying defect in our cells and not just our symptoms. So we fast forward from 2010 to 2013, where Kalydeco had been approved and was showing tremendous results for that small percentage of population that could take them. In addition, Orkambi was showing positive and promising results in initial phase 1 and phase 2 studies. And there was so much hope to be had. So with my health still stable, Julie and I decided to try to take another leap and go for a second child. In April of 2013, we found out that Julie was pregnant, and 2 months later, I got a call from Dr. Boyle saying that I had been accepted to participate in the phase 3 study for Orkambi. On August 1st, 2013, I was officially enrolled in the study, and another phase in our journey with CF would begin. Then came January 14th, 2014, and once again I stood in the maternity ward at Georgetown, holding our son Tate. For a little more than a year, on Orkambi I felt great. While I had not seen an increase in lung function, I was coughing very little, had fewer sinus issues, and many more good days than bad ones. However, this would not last. And in August of 2014, I started frequently getting short of breath and experienced severe and consistent chest tightness. Over roughly the next 8 months, my lung function would drop from 40% to a low of 24%. Dr. Boyle, Dr. Sosnay, and I met on an almost weekly basis trying to figure out what was causing my lungs to continue to decline. Nothing was working. In hopes of helping, I stopped Orkambi for some relief from the chest tightness, went on high doses of prednisone, and took numerous rounds of IV antibiotics. Nothing was working, and stopping Orkambi was heartbreaking. I had literally waited a lifetime to see a drug like this. I began having trouble walking the 10 feet across our living room floor, could certainly not pick up and hold 4-year-old Liam, let alone 1-year-old Tate. I was having more and more frequent panic attacks, anxiety, and prolonged bouts of depression. Things were simply falling apart. I can still see clearly that day about 6 months into this journey, when Julie and I were sitting in clinic having just had another poor PFT. I was depleted, scared, frustrated, all the while trying to stay strong, brave, and shield my family from the fear that was coursing through every bone in my body. It was during this appointment that my care team acknowledged that with my continued decline in lung function, we need to discuss the possibility of a lung transplant for the first time. This was the hardest moment of my life. After several minutes of crying, cussing, probably a little too loud, and disbelief, and then finally coming to terms with the possibility of needing a transplant, as a team, Julie and I and Dr. Boyle and Dr. Sosnay made a decision to continue to have this transplant conversation. But before making transplant the last and only option, we decided to have a bronchoscopy just to see if there was something that maybe we had missed. Fortunately, we found a bacteria that had not been culturing in my routine sputum tests. With this new information, we decided to add an inhaled antibiotic to my routine and do nothing else, to let my lungs rest, recover, and see if this antibiotic could make a difference. Thankfully, it did, and eventually my lung function slowly stabilized and increased to the low 30s. CF had gotten very real for me again. At this point in my life, at 32-ish, I knew at some point that CF would most likely take my life. But something about adding transplant to the conversation made it different. It made it real. Since hitting what felt like rock bottom with my health about 4 years ago, I have since been on Symdeko for the past 2 years. Symdeko has stabilized my lung function between about 28 and 30%. Has kept me off of IVs and healthy enough to see a day which I never thought I would. 7 days ago, when sitting at my kitchen table with Julie, I took my first dose of Trikafta. While I do not know what the ultimate impact of this drug will be on me or my life, I do know the hope that it provides to many, and I hope to all of you. There is hope. Crazy hope. Let's think about this again for a second. 30 years ago, I was 8. We did not have a gene that caused CF. And now, we have a medicine that essentially for 90% of those with CF corrects the underlying defect in the gene. That's amazing. And a true testament to the courage and determination of this community. But this community will not stop. We are not taking our foot off the gas. And as Laura mentioned, I would like to think we are actually accelerating to the tune of $500 million. Trikafta gives me hope and confidence because of what it represents and how it shows that we, as a community, are putting this piece together, this puzzle together. Because of this, I know that we are not far off from a treatment and ultimately a cure that will work for all of us no matter what our mutation is. So as I begin to wrap things up, I would like to leave you with a final couple of thoughts. First, and most importantly, do not let this disease control your child's life, or yours for that matter. Yes, it is important to be germ smart, but let your kids be kids. Do not treat them differently than anyone else. Let them play in the mud, jump in the leaves, join that soccer team, or go to that birthday party. Let them and encourage them to get lost in the moment and to continue to explore their world with wonder and amazement without CF being a constraint. Because as we all know, there will be times when it will do just that. Lastly, it is crucial that as a community we become stronger together and to support and celebrate each other. Trikafta is going to drastically change this disease, but we need to remember that for many, it will not. Because of this, we need to make sure that we continue to celebrate the progress, the successes and progress that we make together, while continuing to be supportive and lifting each other up when we struggle and have setbacks. And we must remember that we all experience this disease very, very differently. What works for me or for you may not work for all of us. But I have seen the power of this community and what happens when we unite. And now, more than ever, we must do just that. We need to unite together to ensure that we find a cure for every single person with CF, because it will take each and every one of us to do just that. So as I close and look out at this room, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for never giving up on this disease and for continuously working to provide more and better tomorrows for those you love and for all of us. Please know that I will be right there with you, not stopping or slowing down until this disease is one we can all say we used to have. So thank you again for your time this morning. And as you leave, remember to hug those you love a little tighter. Be thankful for each and every breath. and always breathe in hope. Thank you. I actually got through that a lot better than I thought I would. So I don't know if you guys have questions. Like I said, I am a pretty open book. I'm happy to answer whatever I can. Yes.
How did you deal with the panic? How did you deal with the panic attacks and depression? You could just get loud.
So in about 2014, before I started to get really sick, I was in a pretty rough spot. And my wife, like she always seems to do, has the answer. And she handed me a book called 10% Happier, which is written by a gentleman by the name of Dan Harris, who is a Good Morning America, one of those show guys and does the nightly news, about how he found meditation. And it resulted from a panic attack that he had on live TV in front of millions and millions of people. You can YouTube it. You can see him go white in the face and completely shut down on live TV. I read that book and it changed my life. I started meditating. I now try to meditate for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour a day if possible. And that has allowed me to, it is not a perfect answer, but it has allowed me to be much more aware of my body and my breath. And so when I start to have panic attacks or anxiety, I try to always sort of turn around, right? It's kind of ironic as a person with CF to focus on my breath, right? Especially at 28%, it's not always that deep. But that has allowed me to sort of combat some of that. After I got really sick, I also turned to medicine. I turned to a drug to help take some of the edge off for a while until I could build my lung function back up to a place where I felt more comfortable not being on that drug anymore, and asked for help through that drug.
I'm pretty loud. I'm one of the loudest in my family. So. You don't have to agree. How old were you when you read the book? I mean, were you a teenager or older?
No. So when I was younger, I tried to get into meditation also, when I was in middle school. But back then, the book that I had read was all about having to try to sit down and completely silence your mind and not think about anything. And for anybody, that's like impossible, right? Like you cannot not think of something. But in 2014, it's 19 now, so 7 years ago. No, that's not 7 years ago, excuse me. About 35, right? No, 33? 33, 32, somewhere in there. I'm 38 now, so however long it's 6 years ago, whatever that was. Excuse me, my math is terrible right now. So I was in my early 30s, and I read it. And for me, the book, it was more about this notion of 10%, right, really resonated. It wasn't about trying to go completely enlightened, but if there was something that could help me become 10% happier, literally, then it was worth a shot. And I have continued to carry that through until now. And it's not perfect. And there's days I don't do it. I can feel it, and I still have panic attacks, and I still deal with depression. And I am still not a pleasant person to be around sometimes. But it has helped to sort of take some of that edge off.
Great.
You recounted a couple of circumstances where you started one of these new drugs like Orkambi or Symdeko, and then there still were episodes of decline. Mm-hmm. And how do you prepare yourself, and this will help others in case that were to happen in the future with Trikafta? How have you thought through that and that, potentiality?
Right. Great question. And yes, as I mentioned, Orkambi did not work for me. Symdeko has worked to the point of keeping me stable. I never got a bump. I have been much healthier. I have not been on home IVs for almost 2 years now, which before Simdeco I was on at least once a year, if not twice a year. You know, when the news of Trikafta came out, I was excited and elated, but I was also on a phone call with a couple of good friends of mine and somebody from the foundation who have a young son with CF. And I expressed my excitement as cautious optimism. And that was because of past experience with modulators and having them not work. And it is scary for me personally, who has advanced lung disease. While I have access to this, there is a portion of me that is very empathetic to those that do not have anything yet. Because for me, it's scary. If this doesn't work, then what is the answer next, right? And sitting at such a low lung function, that jumps right back into the transplant conversation, which I still see the transplant team up here every 6 months. And, you know, I try to take it literally day by day and see what it's going to do. And I have said personally, while it's easy to say and not always easy to sort of rationalize in my own head, is that if this drug did nothing else for me except for eliminate the decline in my lung function, I will stay at 28% for the next 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 years. Yes, I am never going to go run a marathon or participate in the Tour de France, right? And I have trouble walking upstairs, but I can deal with that. But it is hard, and it's scary because you don't know if it's going to work, and you don't know if in 2 years it stops working for some reason. But it's exciting, and there's a lot of hope based around that drug. And again, I use meditation personally, and I try to just focus on the fact that it's here, and I can try to make it work. And if it doesn't, then we do what we've done for the past 38 years, and we try to find the next answer.
Hi, Chad. Thanks so much for sharing your story, and everything that you do is just amazing. So I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old with CF, and we're entering this phase in life where they don't want to do treatments all the time. So I was wondering if you can give any advice or share your experience with maybe going through a rebel phase, and or maybe your dad wants to talk about it. To help kind of empower them, like you seem to be really empowered by just taking control of your health, and any words of wisdom there would be great.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, when I was younger, I feel like treatments were a lot simpler, right? My mom did chest PT on me twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. I did not always want to do them, absolutely, right? Who wants to lay on a couch and have their mom pound on their chest, backsides, and shoulders for 45 minutes or so? You know, to me, empowering your children to take control of their own health will I feel ultimately empower them to want to do those treatments, right? As I know many of us know, right, when you push and push and push on something for somebody, a lot of times it creates a pushback, and that pushback then becomes, well, you tell me I always have to do these, so why do I, I'm not going to do them. Or sure, I'm going to go sit up in my room and do them while I don't really actually do them, right? So I would say, you know, to me, you know, make it as enjoyable as possible, but make them in control of as much of the process as they can be. Because then they will start to take ownership, and they will say, like, okay, I'm going to do this now on, like, my time. Like, I'm ready to go do these. You know, and I don't, excuse the doctors in this room, but in my opinion, if you miss one, it's not the end of the world. And, you know, giving them, like, again, that flexibility and that ownership, I think will make them want to do them a lot more. And yes, they're going to rebel, and, you know, all I can do is say, give them a little bit more of a hug and tell them that it's okay and it's natural. Every single one of us pushes back against this disease at some point in our life, especially because of the regimen that we always have, right? It's like you have to do this twice a day or you have to do these medicines. And if you don't take these pills at this certain time of day, then, right, things can go wrong. And so, always having that regimen eventually leads to people wanting to push back. And I've pushed back. There was a time when I didn't do treatments. And, looking back, had I stayed on them, could my lung function potentially be at 40% instead of 28 right now? I don't know. But I also say if I hadn't managed a bar for 2.5 years in college, my lung function would probably be a lot higher. And so I would just say, give them the flexibility every once in a while to vent or to let go and to not be like CF is controlling some part of my life. And then I think, as I did, eventually you come back to it and you take ownership of it and you realize yeah, it sucks, excuse me, but you do it because you have to. So I hope that helps at some point. And plus, and the other thing I will say real quick is allow them to find connections within this community. And it's hard when they're younger because there is no CF peer connect, right? But I and others that I know are always happy to talk to people. I know that, again, 2 of my good friends who have a young son who's 4, he recently started to have sinus issues. And he had his first sinus surgery at the age of 4.5, right? No kid should have to have polyps removed from their sinuses at 4.5. And he did not want to do his sinus rinses. His mom tried, his dad tried. They even got it and tried to do it themselves. And I said, well, let me see if I can help, right? And I sent him a video of me rinsing my own nose. And after that, he was like, oh, well, Mr. Chad does this, so I can do this, okay. Right, so that's something else that helps. And again, I'm always happy to either talk to them myself or be a resource, or if you connect with other adults or older people with CF, because sometimes you just need to see somebody else who does it.
So one thing we always get is, what would you have, as you're now an adult, what would you wish you had known as you were transitioning across from kids to adults?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I really went to a truly pediatric care center, right? Because it was just Dr. K.
Right.
He was the only one who treated us. And we never really had a sense of clinic. For a long time, I thought I was the only person with CF that he saw. Probably a little bit naive, probably also a little bit of not really acknowledging the fact that I had CF and hating the fact that I had to go to the doctor every month. But the one thing that I think I wish I had known a little bit more is as just taking control of the disease myself and knowing what that process is. What are those medicines? How do I sort of order them? How do I take care of them? How do I control this process myself, and being able to advocate for myself and being able to know that my voice with my care team matters, right? That, yes, mom and dad are always going to be there for as long as they possibly can, but that I'm the one who experiences this disease, and it's my body, and I know my body better than I would hope anybody else does. And to have a little bit of a stronger voice when I was younger in the process versus, then of course when I came up here, it was it was very different, right? But I was also 24 or so, right? And so I controlled that a lot more of the process.
First of all, thank you. Your story is so beautiful and beautifully told.
Thank you.
I never have asked this question, and so I don't want you to feel like you have to answer. Tell me, do you talk to your children about CF, and if so, how? The reason I'm asking is because I hear so much hope and future in your story that I want to be able to use your experience to help how I help older adolescents as they transition into adulthood.
Yes, we tell our kids about CF. They know that dad has CF. I usually have the brakes put on me by my wife because I tend to want to be a little
TMI.
more open, right, and honest about the disease, and having to think too that, okay, these kids are 9.5 and 6, right, and they don't need to know all of it, right? So we try to tell them exactly what they need to know and nothing more. But growing up, they have been doing treatments with me since they were home from the hospital. You know, we talked to our care team to make sure that any of the antibiotics and stuff that I was on, excuse me, was okay for them to be around. But they've always done it with me. For a long time, I think my kids probably thought that every dad that they knew sat in the mornings, right, and did treatments for an hour and a half. You know, now they're starting to realize that doesn't happen, right? And so we try to answer just the questions that they ask of us. And it's hard because our kids are very observant. And Liam now with his iPad and all, and his friends know that I have CF because their friends involved with us. And so, you know, there's also a balance of trying to keep what they know to what he knows. And so we try to just answer what questions they ask and not give them more information, even though I tend to still try to give them more information.
Thank you. Good job.
Are there questions or?
Hi. Thank you so much. That was so moving and helpful. We have a 10-year-old boy, and I just want to hear from your experience how you know, he's going to be in middle school next year. He's on the shyer side and, you know, is starting to share CF with his friends. How did that experience go for you with relationships and friendships and all of that?
I ignored CF, to be honest with you, for a long time. People who were closest to us, family, friends, knew that I had CF. I did not talk about it at school. I was embarrassed with my stomach issues and all that stuff, so I had to find the private bathroom in the school nurse's office and make excuses of why I had to leave. Looking back, you know, I think I would have preferred to have been a little more open with friends about it. But back then also, school, there wasn't a concern of cross-contamination, right, or IPC protocols of potentially having more kids, you know, like if you had a kid who had CF in your school when I was growing up, it was like, you know, they tried to get the two of you together so that you could be buddies, right, and go through it. And nowadays it's very different, and so schools know a lot more about this disease. But I would say for me, it was not until, I did not become this open with my disease until I had gotten very sick in 2014. And that is when I opened up, and it was more of an issue of needing to know that there were other people with CF who are experiencing this disease, and talking and making those connections, even if we experienced it in two completely polar opposite ways, to be able to talk to somebody who got it, right, who understood what it was. And so that has made a huge difference in my life, to being more open with it. And I think that there are ways to bring in close friends. I don't know if you guys do a walk team or any of that stuff. I have found with other people who have young kids with CF that getting those friends involved or their parents involved in those opportunities, even if it starts with 2 or 3 small friends, right, really helps, because then those friends, you know, maybe they don't fully understand what is happening or going on and what the full disease is, but they know that there is something. And so if your kid does miss school or gets sick, right, there's still that group of people that, you know, are supportive and there with him and help him. And, you know, if he has to go to the nurse's office for some reason, right, here's a buddy that he can go and tap and say, hey, I'm having, can you come with me? And there's that support system. So I would start small and have him, if he's got 2 or 3 close friends, or you guys have close family, start with them, and then eventually he'll see that support is there, and be willing to sort of open and discuss it and talk about it. But it's hard, especially when you have to miss school or you have stomach issues, and we've all been there where we can clear out an entire auditorium, and that's embarrassing for anybody, let alone a 10-year-old. So
Thank you very much, and I think your story for us with the boy with CF is one of hope. That I hope he can one day be standing in front of a crowd like this and have such a supportive wife and family as well. So I really appreciate that, and I know you've been, from your advocacy role and working on the Hill to raise awareness. What can we do to raise that awareness, either through is there anything that we need to be supporting or advocating in Congress or in the different state houses, or anything that you think would?
Make sure that the foundation knows I'm putting this plug in, Kirsten. You can text Fight CF to 52886. If you do that, you can all pull out your cell phones right now and do it if you want to.
Repeat that.
It's Fight CF to 52886. If you do that, you'll get a text message response back. If you go in and follow the prompts, it's real simple. You put in your email address, etc. That gets you onto the Advocacy Alerts website, or gets you onto their list. And anytime there is a national policy or some issue that's coming up that we need to take action on, you will get a text message or an email alert saying, hey, we need to take action. If you make sure you put your state in, they will make it local for you in Maryland, or DC or Virginia or wherever you're from. And those action alerts are super simple. The foundation literally does all of it for you. You go online and it's like, send an email to your congressman. All you have to do is put in your name and your zip code and click send. It literally takes 30 seconds. They pre-populate the email. You can cut and paste it and send your own if you want, but they pre-populate it. They blast it to the people who need it. That is sort of the low-hanging fruit. If you want to get more involved on the advocacy side, that text also gets you we do policy update webinars every 6 weeks or so, where for an hour and a half, sometimes shorter, staff from the foundation gets on and talks about, sort of what's happening right now in the legislative world. You can join those. You can also then, if you want to take it to the next level, you can get involved you can set up an in-district meeting with your state, with your congressman or your senators. They're home a lot. I think they're home more than they are actually in Congress. And so they're always home. And so you can call and schedule. And those are awesome because you can take your son with you to these meetings and have him share his story. And I will say, do not be intimidated, because you do not have to know what the policy is to talk to your congressman. You simply have to share your story, and the foundation will give you the bullet points to say, hey, make sure you include this, ask for funding increase to the NIH and the FDA, for example, right? But tell your story. So you can schedule those, and the cool thing about doing in-district meetings is a lot more times you will actually get in front of your representative versus being up on the Hill, where a lot of times you get a staff person because they're running between votes and other meetings and stuff like that. So you can do those in district. And if you need any help, you can contact the foundation, and I don't policy, yeah, you can go through, and they'll connect you, and they will give you they have a whole toolkit that allows you to, who to contact, how to contact them, what emails, they'll give you an email template when you want to request a meeting.
So that's the perfect lead-in to have the CF Foundation people stand up, so you know who they are that are here. Sue and... So questions about advocacy, compass, research, whatever, please seek them out today. Chad, thank you. This has been fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you.